The 12th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.
Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Here's what I've heard from a range of economists across the political spectrum. The banks, because of mismanagement, because of huge risk-taking, are now in very vulnerable positions. We can expect that we're going to have to do more to shore up the financial system. We also are going to have to make sure that we set up financial regulations so that not only does this never happen again, but you start having some sort of trust in how the credit markets work again. I do have confidence that we're going to be able to get it right, but it's not going to be overnight, and there's no silver bullets to this. The fact of the matter is that we are suffering from a massive hangover from a binge of risk-taking.
And it's still getting worse.
And that's still getting worse, and it's going to take some time for us to be able to dig ourselves out of this hole.
In the meantime, what are we as a country, as a state, supposed to do? Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, the economy and the banking industry, especially right here in Nebraska. And joining us today to talk more about that are Mark Wohar, who is a distinguished professor at UNO's College of Business Administration, David Weiss, Vice President of U.S. Bank, and Holly Murphy-Barstow, President of Barstow and Company. Thank you all for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, we're going to start with the obvious question. Give us kind of the update on the economy today.
Well, right now we've been in for a year of financial crisis as well as a downturn in economic activity. The downturn in economic activity has been a downturn in output last quarter of 3.8%. Probably next quarter will be a downturn of about 5%. The really big problem has been jobs. In the last 3 months, we've had more job decline than we've had since 1974. The financial crisis has come about like most financial crises in the past, and that is excessive easing. In particular, decreases in the federal funds rate, and that's the interest rate that the Federal Reserve charges banks for overnight loans, which caused specifically over the years buying of homes and a housing bubble. Eventually that burst. That led to falling housing prices and defaults on homes, and that also led to problems with banks in terms of their mortgage-backed securities that decreased in values. And so we're in this financial crisis, and all financial crises, the economic crisis, for example, in Japan, their economic crises, they were not successful with their stimulus package because their financial package didn't work.
Okay. And very simply, talk to us a little bit about those 3, 4, 5 key factors that really put us in the boat that we're in today.
Well, as I said, number one, the easing. There was a decline in interest which led to excessive borrowing. Led also to excessive risk-taking by not only banks. Banks were giving loans to individuals that really shouldn't have loans, which were called subprime loans. Sometimes they were also called ninja loans, meant they were giving loans to people that had no assets, no income, and no job. And these were then, as I said, packaged, which was called securitization. And these are packaged into these securities and sold. And so they were not only sold in the U.S., but sold overseas. So this is not just a crisis in the U.S., as you I'm sure you know, but overseas. So this is a very dramatic event.
And obviously, Dave, everybody being impacted by this, founded right there in the banking industry. What is the biggest problem right now?
Well, that's a complicated question. Every financial institution is different, and every institution faces its unique challenges. But I think there's several challenges that the industry faces in general. First of all, the market is expecting the banks to be a catalyst for economic recovery. But paradoxically, the recession is putting increased pressure on the banks. We talk about these mortgage-backed securities and bad assets. There's a lot of toxic assets that are weighing down banks' balance sheets, and so they're having to reserve more and more capital to offset some of the future losses that may be associated with this. And the Treasury Department came out on, I believe, Tuesday and talked about a program of a public-private investment partnership that would create a market for these assets to get them off of banks' balance sheets, therefore freeing up capital for these banks to return to some sort of normalcy and begin lending again. And then also there's the TARP program, which has been out there for a while now. U.S. Bank did participate in the TARP program, and I feel is a good example of how the TARP program was supposed to work. To the extent that we received TARP funds, those funds became a part of our capital base. And to the extent that banks have capital, banks can make loans. At U.S. Bank in the fourth quarter, we saw double-digit loan growth in consumer loans, home equity loans, credit cards, student loans. We also saw double-digit growth in commercial loans. And so the money that was injected into U.S. Bank and other banks that have participated in the TARP program has injected liquidity, and that's really the number one goal of banks right now, is to get credit flowing to everyday Americans again. And there's talk of a secondary market for consumer loans, small business loans that would inject additional liquidity into the market.
Okay, and Holly, he just said a mouthful there. And we have people who are watching who are just holding on to any type of hope that they can possibly hold on to. How should we be really feeling about all of this at this point, based on what these two gentlemen have said so far?
Well, I think it's difficult when you turn on the TV and every day there's horrible news, and you can really get fixated on that. But I think much like when you go to the hospital, if you're so sick that you must go to the hospital, and you have a team of doctors that work very hard to diagnose you properly, and they're not always going to agree, but they eventually come to some sort of consensus about what your plan for wellness is. That's exactly what's going on here. And the patient, our economy, has been in the ICU. I think there are signs that we may be released pretty soon into the general population of the hospital. You are seeing more loan growth, which is very, very positive. You are seeing that credit freeze, which was so much a part of what was happening early, that banks were just really holding on to their money. They were afraid to lend it because who knows who would pay them back. And so I think for the average person, it is getting better, and it will get better. I mean, nothing is permanent, not good times, not bad times. This will get better, and I think you're starting to see signs of that, of a general thaw. Just like we get winter in Nebraska, it's over eventually. This too shall pass. But we're starting to see some little tiny, you have to pick through all the bad news, but the economy will turn. The stock market will actually turn ahead of the economy probably. It generally does, about 6 months in advance of when you actually get really solid, good economic news. And that's what's going on right now.
And Dave, I know that this is a very difficult question to answer, but when you are one of those people watching who really has been deeply impacted by this, you've lost a job, you're living literally day to day trying to figure out how you're going to make ends meet. We are all grasping at that end-all to end-all answer of how long. What are we talking about here? We heard the president say perhaps, next year at some point. What, based on what you're able to see, would your prediction be? We won't hold you to it, but I do believe that it will provide some sort of hope for people.
Absolutely, and we'll talk about this more later, but the stimulus package, I think, is a bridge to where we want to get. I think that we would like to see some sort of recovery in the job market, generally by late 2009 into 2010. And there is some good news on the horizon from the stimulus package that will extend benefits to those who have lost jobs and to those that are struggling to find health care coverage, for example.
Okay, well, we're on a roll here, so let's go ahead and talk about the stimulus package. We do have a fact sheet that basically outlines 4 different areas, so if we could go to that, we'll have you walk us through that.
Sure thing. I think that there's been a lot of different numbers thrown out there. The House and the Senate both passed versions of this bill that were above the $800 billion number, but it seems that they've come to an agreement that has settled on $800 billion. It includes both spending and tax cuts. The effects on the economy may not be felt for years, and expenditures to states are important. Specifically, what you'll see right away is extension of food stamp programs as well as unemployment benefits. You're going to see immediate aid to the state agencies that are processing unemployment claims, so that there will be shorter lines, fewer busy signals when people do call in. Those are the immediate impacts that people will see from this measure. Some of the things that will happen down the line are these spending programs, tax breaks, and incentives. There's a homeowner tax credit for first-time home buyers included in this. There is an auto sales tax credit associated with this. There's also investment tax credits for businesses that invest in modernization technologies. And then there's also large spending packages that will go towards bridges, roads, water treatment plants that will hopefully create jobs. And you should see by late 2009 the unemployment start to level off, and maybe even the job recovery happening by late 2009.
Okay, and certainly good news and hopeful news for anyone, as we said, who is going through, especially the rougher times at this point. Now, Mark, as good as all of this sounds, and as much as we all want to cling very, very tightly to this, because it is seemingly the answer that we're all looking for at this point, are there any red flags about this plan that crop up that?
Well, I have a different view. I am a little troubled because my view is to create jobs. That's the number one priority. And what you have here doesn't create as much jobs as I think that could be created. Most of the package, if I were to write a package, would be to spend most of it on infrastructure, like you said, roads and dams and things of that sort. Because those are what states have, what are called these shovel-ready projects, where the people can go to work right away. Now, for example, I'll just give you one example. You think about President Obama talked about how he's going to subsidize having medical records being put on electronic, but that would have been done anyway. So now, why are we subsidizing that? You mentioned that there's going to be a credit for a first-time home buyer. Well, a first-time home buyer, somebody's not going to buy a home if they're worried about losing their job. So, in my view, I just think about in history. Eisenhower spent $600 billion on the road system to rebuild it, and then we're only spending like 5% or so. I don't know, maybe that's not the right percentage. I just did it quick, but the point is that there's not enough on infrastructure, and I don't think. And with tax cuts, and it doesn't necessarily going to create jobs. To me, that's what number one that you want to do, because once you create jobs, then you're going to change the psychology of people. And once you change the psychology, then people are going to say, hey, people have jobs, we're going to go out and we're going to consume. And once we go out and consume, then the economy is going to turn around.
Give us some examples of the shovel-ready projects that you mentioned.
Well, just like there's plenty of bridges going to be falling down unless they get some work done on them. And levees, just like down in New Orleans, levees, dams, things of that sort. Sewers in New York City.
Okay. Sewers here.
Here, for here, too.
There's a major sewer project
right
that needs to be done in the city of Omaha.
Exactly.
Right.
And Holly, your opinion on this whole package?
I would absolutely agree with Mark. I mean, I think that there are a lot of things. This was a political beast. It was the, ugly. Politics is generally fairly ugly, and this was no exception. There were a lot of things that probably normally would slide into a budget bill, but because we had this cover of TARP, it's varied in scope from, think back when the first package came out for TARP, it was 3 pages, Paulson outlined, and now this stimulus package is 800 pages and counting. I mean, at one point it was 1,200 pages. So I would agree that our infrastructure needs are so huge. We are so woefully behind. If you look at what China has done in terms of, they've had a very aggressive stimulus package and has really a country that must invest in infrastructure because they don't have it. We have crumbling infrastructure. We have invested very heavily. The interstate system was a great example that Mark gave, and that's, you know, in the 50s we spent $600 billion building it. Well, I don't know how often you drive on the interstates, but there is throughout the country great need there, and that is the kind of shovel ready. I mean, any metropolitan city can come up with many, many things, and you don't need a high level of training. It would put a lot of people back. This package is supposed to produce somewhere between 3 and 4 million jobs. I'm a little skeptical as well. I think we had to have a bill. This was the best thing they could come up with. You know, I don't know whether it's certainly not the best bill ever, but it was what they came up with.
But it's a place to start. And
It
one
is.
of the Nebraska names we keep seeing, you know, associated with all this is Ben Nelson. Was on the air just, you know, well, seems to be on the air every day talking about this. What is his role in this, his interest in this, Holly?
Well, I think the joke often is said that Ben Nelson is the best Republican the Democrats of Nebraska has ever produced, and really he does function about as comfortably on the other side of the aisle than what he, you know, runs under. His role was key in that he was bringing together more moderate Democrats and certainly some Republicans that were trying to reach across the aisle, and he was kind of, every soundbite I saw said that he was in no interest in a leadership position after trying to ram this through, because they spent hours and hours. He and Susan Collins worked on that. She's from Maine. She's a Republican, and they were trying to find some kind of consensus. The Republicans primarily wanted much more in the way of tax cuts. They felt like that would be much more stimulative. The Democrats wanted some pet projects that hadn't been funded during their years in the wilderness, and were sliding those in. So they were really trying to find some things. You know, they went cutting. You can see they didn't cut a whole lot. I think the last figure I saw was 792. You know, not quite 800. But I mean, these are major numbers. It's stunning when you put the B rather than the M at the end of the projects here.
So, Dave, in an ideal world, I almost said perfect, but we'll call it ideal. As we're looking at this package, walk us down the road here. If things go as you would like to see them go, what can we expect, you know, as we are charting our little timelines and working our way through?
Absolutely, and I would agree that job creation is the number one goal of this stimulus package, and that is really going to help the economy most of all. To that end, that jobs are created, I think you'll see increased consumer confidence. And increased consumer confidence, when you don't know if you're going to have a job, you're not going to go out and you're not going to spend money, and you're not going to do a home improvement project. You're not going to buy that car. You're not going to sell your house because you don't know where the bottom is or if someone will even buy it. So we'd like to see increased consumer confidence, and then on top of that, you would like to see interest rates remain low. The worry is that with all this federal spending, that it would crowd out private investment, and therefore, if we see Treasury rates rising faster than normal levels, then you worry that there's too much government spending and not enough private investment.
Okay, and Mark, based on what Davis said, well, the president just really does not have an easy job ahead of him here.
No.
If everything fell into place the way we would like to see it fall into place, what are we going to need to do then to keep it going down the right path? From an economist standpoint, what is the
Once
best outcome?
it starts in terms of job creation and increases in psychology and the consumer confidence, remember, consumption is 2/3 of output. So once you get more spending, then you're going to get firms investing more, and if interest rates remain low, that's going to encourage investment, and so you'll come out of this downturn. It's going to take a while, because you also remember you still have to stop the housing prices from falling. So things are not going to turn around quickly. It's like a big oil tanker. It doesn't turn on a dime. What we need to do is slow down the decline in employment claims, slow down the decline in prices of homes, things of that sort.
Okay.
One thing I want to say real quick, if I can, is that this hasn't been really said in the papers at all, but there's a price to future generations of this package, and we're passing on debt to future generations. So this country is going to have to deal with Social Security problems, and not even to mention the Medicare and Medicaid, which is dwarfs Social Security. Plus now we have this to pass on to our children. So these are the kind of things that have been said, but should be thought about.
Before we get to in the meantime, then, Mark, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you're obviously up to speed on what's going on. Paint a picture for us of what things are going to look like about 20 years down the road here then.
Not good. Not good at all, because how are we going to finance these expenditures? For the longer we wait, I guess the best way to put it, there's no more is there a costless solution. The issue now is whose ox is going to be gored. That's the only issue. And pretty soon, it's going to be everybody's ox, but how deep is it for you, and how deep is it for him, and how deep is it for me?
You're a real bubble burster there, Mark. Dave and Holly were helping me feel a little bit better about the whole thing, but no, I appreciate your realistic
This is 20
perspective
years
on
or
this.
25 years.
I hope to still be around 20 years from now, so I'm looking at it from that perspective. But I do really appreciate your realism there, and being able to help us through that. I do want to talk about in the meantime, though, because we are, obviously we have an audience of folks out there who are hanging pretty much on your words today. So Dave, tell us, in the meantime, what are the banks going to be doing here?
Well, this is what I'm telling my customers and clients right now, is that despite what you're hearing, the banks still are the safest place for your money. 98% of banks are well capitalized, well-run institutions that are FDIC insured, and never has a penny of FDIC insured deposits has ever been lost. In addition, the FDIC has temporarily raised their guarantee amounts from $100,000 to $250,000 per insured institution, and that's set to run through the end of the year. As well, I think banks are much better supervised today. I think they're much better regulated today. I use the analogy of the basketball player who's right-handed, but then breaks that right hand and has to learn to dribble with their left hand. When the right hand heals, they're much more versatile basketball player. They can dribble with their left, they can dribble with their right. Banks are going to come out the other side of this financial crisis much better run, much better capitalized, and much more prepared to meet the challenges.
I think you just put some minds at ease there, and we appreciate that very much. Now, Holly, and I may have some folks chuckling at me here, but for those individuals who do have some extra money right now, they actually have a chunk of change that they are nervous about placing somewhere because they're not sure where the safest place is or where they're going to net the best, the best outcome. What would you say to an individual or company who's watching right now thinking, I do have that and I want to make the best out of it that I can?
Well, I think first you have to give that money a job. You can't just say, well, is this money that if your kid's getting married in 2 years, that needs to be in the bank, or it needs to be in a very safe location. There's the FDIC programs. Money markets have obtained some special FDIC guarantees that will hopefully continue. So it depends. This is a long-term investment. Maybe you want to start to stage in. At some point we'll turn, and just as we went down very, very quickly. I mean, it blows my every investor's mind to see how much wealth we lost as a world, not just even a country, in the scope from September 15th. I think if we could roll back one event and do one thing over, the government would never have let Lehman go down, because that started this crisis of confidence. That was the disaster that befell us. So one thing the government now knows, there's not going to be another Lehman out there, no matter what it costs. And if they're going to overshoot, that's better than undershooting, because sometimes you get behind that snowball and you can't recover. You can't price it low enough, you can't go fast enough, you can't do anything. So housing prices have to stabilize. There are a lot of things that need to happen, but I think somewhere in here you're going to want to start to commit money. There are going to be some good buys. I think probably small companies, they're usually the first ones into the tank. When the economy starts to go bad, they'll be the first ones out. You probably want to focus on infrastructure, perhaps alternative energy. When the economies do start to recover, that energy will become, even though we've seen oil down below $40 a barrel again, once economies start to perk up, that demand for energy is going to go skyrocket again. So once again, energies will become important, and alternative energies in particular. So there are going to be places to put your money. There are some excellent values on the bond side because they're just priced without any reality in mind. I saw yesterday that there was a pool of private mortgages, people who are paying their mortgages. They are all identified with a credit score of almost 800. The best credit score you can get is 850. These things are priced at 14 cents on the dollar. That is insane. That is crazy. That assumes that everyone in this whole studio is never going to pay their mortgage again. And you know what? In the whole state of Nebraska, there are not 20,000 subprime mortgages in the whole state. So we haven't really been impacted to the degree that our fellows in California or Florida, that's the foreclosure capital of America. We haven't really seen it hit yet. It will probably hit sometime. It's probably hitting now. We tend not to know until, it's a few months gone past. But, I think there's places for money to go. But right now, it's not a bad thing to have some money. And be sure you understand what your risk tolerance is and when you're going to need that money. Because people make a mistake of taking short-term money and putting it in a long-term investment. That's a bad idea.
Okay. And Mark, final question here, and not a lot of time left, but I want to ask it. We talked about the news earlier, and people can't seem to turn it on without having something, negative reported. How much stock should we take in what the media tells us? What?
Well, listen to all the people that talk. Everyone's going to have a different view, and be educated and educate yourself. Read the papers and just realize people are going to have a different view. People are going to have a different view of what I said, and so just try to educate yourself and make your own assessment among those people.
Okay. Dave, anything to add to that briefly?
I think banks are open for business, and there's good banks out there, and they're ready to make loans. So.
Very good. And with every program, we try to put some information up at the end that will somehow tie together what we've talked about. And Holly, you did send over some websites for us, so I'd like to put those up on the screen now if we could, and have you just briefly tell us what they are and what they do.
Well, I think two things that people are hungry for information and maybe they don't know where to go. Bankrate.com is a great place to go and check out rates for cars and houses. Also has about 200 different calculators. ChooseToSave.org is a really good place to go and figure out what it's going to take in terms of dollars for you to retire. I think right now, getting a handle on your own personal finances, managing your money better, that's what all of us can do. We can't change the market, but you know what? We can change the way we live our lives.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for joining us today. What a great program. We appreciate your insights very much and your expertise. Thanks to all of you for watching, and we will see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at untv.unomaha.edu. If you'd like to share your comments about this show, call UNO TV at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours.
The 12th season of Consider This is brought to you in part by From the Top, a national program showcasing the musical talents of young people. From the Top can be heard on KVNO Classical 90.7 each Saturday at 6 p.m.